Number one is shame. Now, what we're talking about are the 10 things that people with autism tend to hide. And I got to admit, we tend to be very successful at hiding some of these things. Now, everything we're going to talk about, all 10 of these principles, are built upon this one founding concept, this one founding observation of shame. Well, what is shame? It is defined as an unpleasant emotion that stems from an awareness of one's own shortcomings. So we feel like we don't measure up, and so we try to hide whatever it is that keeps us out of that matrix, that the social hierarchy that we crave to belong to, even though, quite frankly, many of us who are autistic, it's not a matter of climbing up the matrix or climbing up the hierarchy. It's a matter of just getting into it. I mean, some of us would be happy just to be included on the bottom rung, but we're not even in it. But to make sure that we belong, or at least try to feel like we belong, we will hide those things that embarrass us, that shame us, that make us so different that nobody wants us in the hierarchy. Number two is inferiority, which is what produces shame. In fact, all of these things, again, produce shame. So we feel like we don't measure up. Now, you've heard this said before. I think I mentioned this in another video maybe, that somebody will see another person who they think is acting a little bit cocky, a little bit over the top, and they will say that person needs to be taken down a notch or two. That is evidence of the social hierarchy. They're thinking in terms of notches, going up a notch, climbing up the scale. But I've noticed that I've never heard anybody say of another person, that guy needs to be taken up a notch or two. That guy he seems to feel inferior. He seems to have a lot of self-doubt, or she. So we need to rally around this person and give them a little boost and encouragement. And, build their confidence. Now, maybe mom and dad might do that. Maybe a teacher may do that. But by and large, of your social peer group, we like to take each other down so we can climb up, not the other way around. Well, people with autism, we get knocked down a peg or two all the time. It's like just a daily, all-day occurrence. And so we develop a sense of inferiority. Little kids, 4 or 5 years old, we go off to preschool. When I was a kid, we didn't have preschool. We started with kindergarten. But we'd go off to kindergarten or preschool or whatever, and the first thing we learn is not our ABCs, and not 1, 2, 3, learn to count and do addition and math. What we learned is that we're inferior. The first thing we learn in school is we don't fit in. That's lesson number one. All right, so number one, we have shame. Number two is inferiority or self-doubt. And number three is distrust. It's hard for me to imagine anyone who has autism who doesn't distrust almost everyone. Now, this is not obviously unique to people with autism. There is good cause to distrust people. If you've ever been scammed, if you've ever been cheated, if you've ever been lied to, and chances are if you are human and you are alive and you have been alive over, say 5 minutes, there has been a point in time in your life when you have been cheated, where you have found that those around you are less than honest all the time. But it seems to be more so among people with autism, among people with Asperger syndrome. And so we have these misplaced expectations to begin with, because a lot of us, if not most of us, are just flat out gullible. As I said in the last video, we actually believe the used car salesman likes us, And when we find out after the sale is over, he just did it for the money. He just wanted us to buy that old car. Then we have distrust. And, some of that, if not a lot of it, is actually justified. And some of it, I think, is even necessary. But the problem is, a lot of times we try to hide the distrust, because when we show people that we don't trust them, somewhere in the recesses of our mind, it seems, that we are thinking that if I don't show my trust to these people, they're not going to like me. And there we go again. We have that craving for belonging, to be a part of the matrix, part of the hierarchy. And so we don't want people to think that we're distrusting, because when you are overtly distrusting, people say, well, obviously this guy's accustomed to being scammed. This guy is accustomed to being cheated. So let's cheat him. This is who he is. He's the person who is supposed to be cheated. So we try to hide that. Number 4 is loneliness. Now, when we talk about loneliness, we're talking about something that makes us feel worthless or makes us feel unworthy. And you notice the root word there is worth. That means value, that we as people or as an individual just don't have the value that other people have. Now, where do we get that? Well, maybe it's innate, maybe it's genetic. But my life experience has been that, you just learn that, and you learn it very quickly. Whenever you are in a social situation, and again, this comes totally from experience. When you are in a social situation, there are others who make sure that you know that you don't belong. You are not a part of it. You are set aside, and you are meant to be lonely. Now, the weirdness about this thing is when you try to get into the hierarchy, when you try to get into the social sphere, what you discover is they don't want you there. And again, I know there are exceptions, but they're either trying to get away from you or they're trying to get you away from them. So what happens is you wind up being by yourself. So there's no more pressure when you're by yourself. So loneliness is something we try to hide because we don't want to signal to other people that we have this flaw. And again, it goes back to number 1, shame. We have this flaw, and that is, we're lonely. And we're lonely because we're flawed. And we're flawed because we're lonely. All right, so what I'm discovering here is the loneliest place in the world for me is in a crowd. I don't like social situations. But if I'm not in a crowd, I'm alone, and, well, I'm still lonely. So there is a word, I had to look this up, but the word is liminal. And what it means is something that is a state or a place that's in transition. Think of it as dusk. It's not nighttime, it's not daytime, it's dusk or dawn. The sun is not up, but yet you can see the shadows fading or the shadows coming, whichever. So that is liminal. And when it comes to loneliness, loneliness is what I say liminal. Because we're not in the crowd, we're not out of the crowd, we're just kind of lonely wherever we are. We're somewhere in between, somewhere in that strange, twilight zone. That's a good term for it. We're somewhere in the mix. But I don't like to be alone. So I don't like people to be around me. But then again, I don't want to be alone, So there you go. That is the twilight zone. That is the liminal existence. Number 5, and this to me is really a big one, and that is health issues. Now we're talking about both mental and physical health issues, such as stress. When I say mental health issues, I'm talking about stress and anxiety. Sometimes we don't even know we're in a point of stress. We don't know. We are totally unaware of it. Now, I took a look at Harvard Health Publishing, their website, and I discovered that autoimmune disorders, autoimmune disease, is often caused by stress. And so there is a correlation. And the reason I looked this up is I went for a period almost a year, somewhere between 6 and 12 months, where I just came out of it about a year ago. But I was so smitten by autoimmune disorder that I just hurt all over. I couldn't hardly walk. I literally could not get out of bed. Well, easily I couldn't get out of bed. It took me like 10 minutes just to roll out. Now I can jump out. I love to walk. I love to run. I love to jog. but I couldn't take more than a few steps. I was almost in a position where I had to be bound to a wheelchair, and there was nothing wrong with me. And I was wondering, what caused this sudden onset, this autoimmune disorder where my body is attacking itself. And so I did what everyone does, and I got on the internet, and I went looking for it. It being the answer. Why? What is the cause, the root cause of autoimmune disorder? You know what I found out? I discovered that a primary cause is stress, psychological disorder. That will prompt, not every single time, but that will prompt autoimmune disorder. Now, I was listening to a podcast, can't remember who the guy was. Wish I had saved it, but he was a rheumatologist. And he was saying that in his medical practice, when he has a new patient come in who has a problem with autoimmune disorder, the very first question he will ask them is, have you had a recent death in your family? And the reason he asks that question is because he knows that kind of stress of having a death in the family, that type of anxiety, will often trigger autoimmune disorder. So what we find is people with autism often have both mental and subsequent physical disorders. And we kind of hide those. And it could be we're hiding them because we just don't know. We're not aware that those physical problems are caused by stress. We just don't know. Who would have known? I mean, how do you know that? I didn't know it till I started researching it. Well, this comes from Harvard Health Publishing, Harvard Medical School, and I'm quoting here, but it says a new study has raised the possibility that stress may cause autoimmune disease. Now, I'm surprised it said a new study because this is nothing new, but I guess there are always new studies coming out, so this is a new study of an old topic because it found a higher incidence of autoimmune disease among people who were previously rather diagnosed with stress-related disorders. Then I found this at the National Library of Medicine. Their website, or rather this was published on PubMed.gov, but it says, moreover, many retrospective studies found that a high proportion, now get this, up to 80%, of patients reported uncommon emotional stress before disease onset. Did you catch that? Before someone has autoimmune disorder diagnosed, 80% of the time that was preceded by stress. So it's psychological problems, emotional problems, causing a physical response. That paragraph goes on and says, unfortunately, not only does stress cause disease, but the disease itself also causes significant stress. So you got a cycle, you got a loop, you got a vicious cycle going back and forth. I have physical problems because of stress, and I have stress because of physical problems. This is something that a lot of people with autism hide. And they're not hiding it intentionally, they just don't even know what's happening. They just think they feel bad. Then I found this at Forbes.com. Although the brain does not process emotional pain and physical pain identically. Now, you got to pay attention to this because it's very important. Research on neural pathways suggests there is a substantial overlap between the experience of physical and social pain. And it goes on to talk about tests done with fMRI, where they look at the brain, what triggers, part of the brain. They say light up the brain even though it doesn't literally light up. And they found that when you have physical trauma, like poke your finger with a pin or something, that triggers part of the brain. And if you have emotional trauma, like rejection, it triggers the same part of the brain. In other words, your mind is responding to emotional pain the same way, the same magnitude as if it were physical pain. Now, they're not identical, but effectively, we can say they're basically the same thing. One pain is just like the other with very little variation. So that means that we have what I would call emotional wounds. And we try to hide those. Sometimes we don't even know we have them. We're hiding them and we don't even know we're hiding them because we don't know we have them. Now, a few years ago, 2012, 2013, I can't remember, I had brain surgery. And they cut a big hole in my head. And a lot of people joke and they say, yeah, we knew there was something going on there. But beside that, I have a scar on the top of my head. I mean, people say you got a hole in your head. I literally got well, it's depression, not a hole. In fact, you can maybe even see part of it, scar on my forehead. But it's hidden. It's well hidden because I have hair. If I were to ever shave my head, you'd see this gaping cavity at the top of my head where they went in, where the surgeon went in and had to stop a hematoma, subdural hematoma, stop the bleeding. But it's well hidden, but it's still there. It's a scar. I mean, it's a big scar. You just can't miss it. I had the heart surgery. I got a scar. Can't see it. I got it hidden. Got my shirt on. I wouldn't show you even if I didn't have a scar, but that's beside the point. So we say number 5 is we hide our physical issues and we hide our subsequent mental issues and then we hide our subsequent physical issues because they are a cycle. Number 6 is painful memories. We're not going to dwell on this one, but everyone has painful memories. But I think if you were to take a group of people who are autistic and ask them about their painful memories, virtually all of them would probably tell you, I mean, their most painful memories, virtually all of them would tell you about being abused emotionally through rejection. I could be wrong on that, but no, I don't think so. The 7th thing we tend to hide is depression. Now, depression is particularly shameful for men because we're not supposed to be depressed. We're supposed to project strength. Now, women, it's okay because they have been programmed socially and maybe genetically to be in a position where it's perfectly okay to be sad and to show that sadness and sorrow because you don't have to be strong all the time, but men are expected to be strong. So you can't be depressed. That's a weakness. And by the way, if you ever run for political office, I remember back maybe in the 70s, I can't remember the guy's name, but there was someone who was running for president, and it came out that he had been treated for depression. But basically, he had to drop out of the race because of the stigma that was attached to it. So if we have depression, we try to hide it. And the way that I hid it, when I was a teenager, when I was college age, I would sometimes just literally break down and cry. My depression was that severe. And I would explain, man, these allergies, the smoke in the eye, smoke in my eye argument, or excuse rather. I'd say, boy, allergies are bad this time of year. Middle of winter, there were no allergens out there, but I felt depressed. And it came to the point where sometimes I just literally break down and cry. Oh, these allergies are getting to me. Number 8 is guilt. This is self-blame. Now, a lot of times this goes undetected even to people with autism themselves. For example, we will say that somebody rejects me because I am autistic, or because I look this way, or because I behave this way, or whatever. That is a form of self-blame. Or we may say, if I were only, that's self-blame. If I were only a man, they wouldn't treat me like this. Truth of the matter is people scam men too. You may not know that. But you may say, if I were just a woman, they wouldn't bully me like this. Believe it or not, women get bullied. Sometimes not physically as much as guys do, but sometimes it hurts. Like we said earlier, the emotional bullying is even worse. Or we may say, if I were only taller, stronger, wealthier, a different ethnicity, if I were just different, they wouldn't be doing me this way. You know what that is? That's self-blame. Or we may say, I noticed they treat me like this, but they don't treat so-and-so like this. You know what you're doing? Again, that is self-blame. Now, it could be true. I mean, it could be that they don't treat the other people the way they treat you. In fact, it probably is true in many cases. But that is a form of guilt and self-blame, and we try to hide it often. We think it to ourselves, but how often have you just blurted out, if I looked as good as he did or she does, people wouldn't treat me like this. Well, maybe you have said it, but most of the time those are thoughts we keep to ourselves. Number 9 is anxiety. Well, what is anxiety? Got a definition for you. This comes from medlineplus.gov, and it says anxiety is a feeling of fear, dread, and uneasiness. It might cause you to sweat, feel restless and tense, and have a rapid heartbeat. It can be a normal reaction to stress. For example, you might feel anxious when faced with a difficult problem at work, before taking a test, or before making an important decision. It can help you cope. The anxiety may give you a boost of energy or help you focus. But for people with anxiety disorders, the fear is not temporary, and it can be overwhelming. Now, people with autism often live a stressful life. There was a time in my life, long period of time in my life, talking years, when it was difficult to walk in a straight line. Literally. I was so self-conscious, so filled with anxiety, so overwhelmed with feelings of inferiority, paranoid. And you try to talk to people like this or about this, and typically the response that I get, notice I say that present tense, not just something in the past, is nearly always they are dismissive. They don't want to deal with it. And so we have a problem with anxiety, and we tend to hide that, again, because, well, we don't want to look flawed, because we don't want to be rejected. Number 10 is this, financial challenges. People with autism tend to be financially challenged because it's really difficult to hold a job, I should say, because we're just rejected at the workplace. Now, you think if you go to a job, have a good attitude, you work really hard, you do all the right things like show up on time, and actually do the work, that constitutes a valuable employee. Well, technically, I guess it does. But still, if you don't fit in with a hierarchy, the natural inclination of the troop or the group or the crowd or whatever you want to call it is to either get away from you or to get you away from them. And if it's a workplace, chances are they're not all going to quit their job so they can get away from you. So what's the other option? That is to nudge you out, to elbow you out of their presence. And they will go to a supervisor, they will complain about you, they will give you a hard time, try to get you to quit, try to get you fired, anything they can do for no logical, rational reason other than due to your autism, you just don't fit. The outcome is you're financially challenged. And what is more embarrassing than being broke? Can't have a nice car, can't have a nice clothes without going in debt. And you don't want to go in debt because, well, that's embarrassing. Got a low credit score. can't have the nice things. Sometimes you can't have anything. Sometimes you have to go on public assistance. And you didn't do anything wrong. It's not like you're lazy. It's not like you're an alcoholic. I mean, you may have a problem with substances, but I don't know. But that's not the root problem. And so we try to hide it, try to cover up. And we say, I'm kind of ashamed of that. And I'm not sure that there's anything wrong with hiding our flaws, But there is something wrong where we are put in a place where we have to hide our flaws. If this video has been a help to you, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to share it on social media. And if you've not yet subscribed, this is your opportunity to click the subscribe button.